Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's Andrew Ibarra, and in this video we're going to be creating some custom policy definitions and deploying them through EPAC. There's going to be two methods to doing this. The first one's going to be using a template and me walking you through filling it out just so that you understand all the main components. And then the second is going to be the more simpler and easiest way to grab your policy definitions and quickly put them into EPAC. So let's get started by looking at our policy definitions folder. You notice that it is empty here. What I'm going to end up doing is creating a new file and naming this policy.jsonc. Typically, I go ahead and name it something that's relevant to the policy I'm deploying, but for now, let's just create it just to fill this in together. So let's go to the EPAC website and migrate to define policy resources. You'll notice on the left-hand side, we have policy definitions, policy set definitions, policy assignments, and so forth. With each of these different documents that we have here, we have templates for you to quickly grab and put in content for that file. So I'm going to copy the template for policy definitions and go back to my VS Code and paste the contents here. Now, it will be incorrect at first because, again, it's more of just a skeleton to fill out, and I'll walk you through each of these different components. Starting with line 2 with the schema. So the schema is a reference to the file that we have published online that helps you notify if there's any inconsistencies or anything wrong with your file. It's best practice just to keep that there. Line 3 is the name of this file itself. What I mean by that is whenever we're going to be referencing this policy, this custom policy definition in a policy set or a policy assignment to actually assign it to a subscription or management group, we need to have this name filled in, and this is what we're going to be referencing within the EPAC folder structure when we want to take this specific definition and assign it or use it in a policy set. It's typically best practice to have a unique identifier, so using a GUID would be reliable to ensure that it's not going to conflict with another policy definition that you're going to be referencing or creating. Alternatively, you could use a human readable name. Just make sure it's unique so it's not conflicting with another policy definition. And then we jump straight into the properties property, which is one-to-one to what the policy properties are through the native JSON language for policy definitions. And what I mean by that is if we go to the portal and go find a random Azure policy, I'll be going with allowed locations since it's simple and straightforward. Click into any built-in definition and you'll notice that there's a JSON file or JSON content that's associated with every single policy definition. Immediately, the first property you see is properties, and it's one-to-one to what's in here. So if I wanted to make a custom version of this, I would simply copy everything that is within the content of the properties and replace it with what's on my template for the properties. And I'll format this just to get rid of some of these warnings. And that's it. So at this point, you can technically deploy this custom policy that we just created just to showcase that you can modify it and make it unique. I'll give the display name of this one EPAC-allowed locations. And maybe you want to update the effect to be parameterized, or for this case, just for simplicity, I'll just make it to where it's hard-coded to be audit. And let's go ahead and save this, and we're going to close this. So now it exists within our policy definitions folder structure, meaning when it's time to actually assign this or not assign it to deploy it into our tenant, it's going to pick this one up. So let's go ahead and run the command to build the deployment plan. This is going to find the delta on what's inside of your folder structure to what's inside of your Azure environment. Just to confirm, in global settings, I have it set to owned only, so it's not going to be deleting any other custom policy definitions, policy assignments, policy sets. It's only going to be managing what's inside of my folder structure. And likewise, I set the deployment root scope to be the tenant ID. So when we go to check where this policy definition gets deployed to, we'll be looking at the tenant ID and managing the definitions there. So the command to do the deployment plan is Build-DeploymentPlans. I have EPAC installed through PowerShell on my terminal, so I can quickly just run Build-DeploymentPlans, and I'll hit enter. And you'll notice it's going to start outputting information that it finds as far as the management group count, the subscription count, and resource groups. Other additional information such as the built-in definitions or built-in definition sets that currently exist inside of your tenant, maybe custom definitions and other valuable information. So we'll let this run, and once it's complete, we'll notice that there should be an update, and it's going to notify that there should be an addition that's going to be deployed of a policy definition into our environment. All right, so this did complete, and we can tell at the bottom it says deployment plans generated successfully. If there weren't any changes, it would just say no changes found. And we can also see with the deployment plan output that there was this policyplan.json file that was generated. If we scroll up to look at the overall plan summary, we can notice within policy definitions, there's one total change, the one being new, and no other changes for policy sets, policy assignments, which is good. It's what we're expecting for just deploying one policy definition. In the output folder, which is now generated because of this plan, we can confirm that there's a new change within policy definitions. So if you were to look at the JSON for this policy definition, it should be one-to-one for the custom one that we created. And if we were to collapse this and look at exemptions or assignments and the other properties within this plan output, you'll notice that it's empty, which again is expected because we're only deploying that one policy definition. So let's quickly just confirm within the policy portal that there is not already an EPAC allowed locations policy deployed, definition deployed, and confirm the scope is the tenant root group for me. So this checks out. No policies are yet deployed, but we do have the plan ready to go. So let's deploy the policy with the command Deploy-PolicyPlan and hit enter. And this should be rather quick. So it already completed. You will notice that it shows the output showing that it was creating and updating the policies, completed EPAC allowed locations, and that's it. The policy definition should now be in the Azure portal. And if we move over there, typically it takes a few seconds, maybe 5 to 10 seconds for it to finally appear inside of the Azure portal, but for us it was rather quickly. And we can see that it's EPAC allowed locations, which is the display name we gave it. It's a custom definition, and if we look at the JSON for it and scroll down, we can see that the effect is hard-coded to audit, which aligns to what we did at the beginning of creating this definition. So at this point, if anybody had access to modify this definition, change it, rename it, and you were to run the command again, it'll output showing that there's a change. And if you run the deploy plan again, it will overwrite any changes that somebody did manually. So this policy definition is 100% being managed through EPAC at this point forward. Now let's move on to the quicker and faster, more reliable way to easily create a policy definition, which is going to be leveraging a website called AzAdvertizer, which is made by Julian Hayward, who is a Microsoft employee, and I'll put his LinkedIn information in the description down below if you want to check him out. He runs this AzAdvertizer site, which has essentially all policy definitions and policy sets and other helpful information that you can see here on the top right when it comes to deploying and managing Azure policy. This has all the ALZ policies, which are the Azure Landing Zone policies, community policies that have been published to the site, as well as all the built-in policy and policy definitions. So for us, I want to move to the policy page and go to all. And from here, let's find the same allowed locations policy that is in the definitions. So I'll find the built-in one for this one. And rather than copying the properties section of it, I'm just going to copy the definition ID. And this unique identifier for this built-in policy and moving over to the AzAdvertizer, filtering to that ID will bring you here to the definition that is stored within the AZ Policy Advertiser site. Clicking into it will open up a new tab, and scrolling to the bottom will show the exact same policy definition JSON, but it conveniently has a button for copy definition for EPAC here. And that's for all of the policy sets and policy definitions. So let's just copy this content, go back to the EPAC folder structure and policy definitions. Let's create a new one. I'll name this one AZ policy, JSON C, and simply paste. And it's a one-to-one copy of what the built-in policy for allowed locations is, although copying it over from the AzAdvertizer automatically fills in the name with the unique GUID as well as a schema. So it's already an EPAC notation. So you can easily find any built-in policy that you're looking for, or any AOZ or community policy on the AzAdvertizer website. Find the copy definition for EPAC at the bottom of the page for that definition, and quickly just paste the contents into a file. Hit save, and let's run this again for build deployment plans. Once it finishes, we're going to have the exact same output summary. So where we can see that now in the definition summary, one resource is unchanged, being the one that we first deployed. And now there's one total new changes, being a new policy definition being deployed. If we scroll up a little bit as well, you can see that there was found 2 policy files. So the 2 policies, the original one that we manually created and the other policy file for the one that we quickly created with AzAdvertizer. And we can confirm all the changes again through the output. We didn't make any changes to the copied version from AzAdvertizer, so the display name is still the original allowed locations, which is fine. So let's go ahead and deploy this with the Deploy-PolicyPlan. And once this completes, should take, again, a few seconds. Let's go back to the Azure portal and just confirm that there is now 3 allowed location policies. One being the built-in allowed location, the other being the EPAC allowed locations, the first one we made, and the last one being the new custom one that we created through the AzAdvertizer site. And we'll just give it a few seconds for this to update. And there it is. So I'll try to sort this and make it a little bit easier to see. Top one, allowed locations, the built-in policy. Second, allowed locations is the custom policy, and the bottom one for the EPAC allowed locations is the other custom policy that we first deployed. The last thing I want to quickly cover is in any of the definition folders that you have here on the left-hand side, policy definitions, policy assignments, exemptions, and so forth, it supports subfolders. So if you have maybe a folder for testing or a folder for production versus non-production as an example, you can place these templates into categorized folders, and EPAC has the logic and understanding to go through the subfolders to find the exact same policy templates. And it does help as you go from 1 or 2 policy definitions to maybe a couple hundred, depending if you're using like the ALZ policies, which the majority of those are custom. So let me know if there's anything in particular that you'd like to see or anything I missed as far as policy definitions and custom definitions go. Leave a comment down below. And if not, then I'll be seeing you in the next video where I'll be taking these exact policy definitions and using them in a policy set. Thanks, everyone.